Why should companies or leadership choose to use gaming as a tool to improve their performance?
I think it's got demonstrable value, and there are metrics around that. I mean, we are currently tracking at least a 10% saving on any program or project fees or costs for clients we're working with.
Wow.
That 10% saving essentially comes from less overrun,
Yeah.
because you're preempting where those overruns are going to happen, and you can bring in your contingency plans. Or it's because you're avoiding mistakes, because you're identifying those preventable mistakes in advance.
Yeah.
So by reducing mistakes, by helping avoid the errors, if you like, things become slicker, faster, and on time. So that's where you're getting these big savings.
So you're tracking pound or euro savings, actual hard metrics.
Yeah, because most of the time a client they want to know that.
Yeah.
If we do this, what is the benefit?
Yeah.
What's the value that it brings? And whilst you can talk about lots of other benefits, which we'll maybe chat about in a minute, one of the hardest metrics essentially is how much money is this going to save me versus how much it costs me to run the actual game.
Yeah.
And so we do track
the
difference that it's made, the decisions that have come from them, how those decisions have changed the outcomes, what that would have meant if they hadn't taken those decisions.
Wow.
Because that's essentially the evidence that lots of people want to hear.
That's really powerful though. I mean, it's the acid test question, right?
It is.
How much are you going to make me or save me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've 10% is the average.
Yeah.
With one client on a multi-million-pound program, we saved them 100%.
Yeah.
Purely because they were going to end up spending at least double what they previously budgeted.
Yes.
To fix all the problems that were identified by the pressure test.
Yes.
So you definitely want to have that sort of. I mean, I think it's also comforting for us.
Yeah.
It means that we feel we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So we would hold those metrics anyway, not as some sort of marketing or sales collateral.
Yeah.
More the fact that we are sure that we're doing a good job and delivering what people want us to do.
Yeah. I don't have those metrics, those numbers, for any of the games that I've been involved in over the years. I've taken a slightly different approach to trying to capture value, which is to say, really, certainly in the drugs industry, the pharmaceutical industry, these companies spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds bringing drugs to market, and a workshop costs a small fraction of that.
Sure.
Many decimal points less. And so if you're spending all your money on running these studies, hiring teams, getting the message out there, then really one of the things that you could be doing that's insignificant in terms of cost, but very powerful in terms of value, is running a workshop where you get the right people at the right time in the room to really, then depending on what the scope of the workshop is, to test the assumptions, to develop the strategy, or to kick the tires of the strategy and refine it, or whatever it might be, get the right people in the room at the right time with the right information and intelligence to support that, with a mandate that's very clear. The question is, why wouldn't you do that? You'd be an irresponsible leader to not pay to make sure that that was done, because the benefits then flow from that. And we will talk about them, but they are, it's just a function of responsible management to get that constellation of people, time, information, asking the right questions, being properly facilitated so that everyone feels properly emotionally engaged with the strategic issue that they're dealing with. Whether it's a launch or whether it's something else going on.
No, I think you're dead right. It's almost that getting people together part. I think is another valuable aspect of any sort of game. I think that organisations will try and get senior leaders together, or even whatever it is, they'll try and get people together to come and discuss the issue. But inevitably, busy stuff gets in the way. And somebody will have a meeting, somebody will have something else they can't move, somebody's got to be overseas.
Yes.
And I think there's an interesting facet sometimes of what we do that it changes behaviours within the organisation
Yeah.
by you being an external
Yeah.
supplier, almost
Yeah.
coming in to run the session.
Yes.
People feel like they don't have as much latitude to go off and do something else that they think is more important.
Yes.
So you actually tend to get better participation,
Yes.
better attendance levels, if you like, through having an external facilitator. And but you've also got that genuine ability, as you touched on earlier, to get everybody around the room. It doesn't happen that often.
No.
To get, and particularly not to get such a broad spectrum around the room, to really have that facilitated, helpful discussion, drawing out the positive side of things.
Yes.
And trying to stay away from, if you like, just personal conflict.
Yeah.
That people are falling out because you've got that external facilitator.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that. One of the critical success factors for me is that actually you don't have people Skyping in. I think your point about around in the room or around the table,
Yeah.
real people
Yeah.
dealing with very important issues doesn't happen, enough. And so the idea of people Skyping in or in and out or turning up with a mobile phone.
Yeah.
To your other earlier point, you set expectation for the leadership, but I think leadership should set expectations for everyone who's come to that workshop around those behaviours. You're being there and you're sort of in the present, to use the common parlance.
Yeah.
You're not being distracted. We're dealing with very, very important issues here. We have external support. All of that builds up in the mind of the person coming to say, oh wow, I need to be here.
Yeah.
I can't miss it.
Yeah.
And in fact, without question, one of the biggest benefits to me, aside from better decision making, which comes from better assumptions, better strategy, better decisions, you can intervene at any of those points, better implementation plans, it's generally a call to action, right? I think most of the times when you have these workshops, people feel confident because they've addressed the real issues surrounding the opportunity or the threat. They've really, really had a good go at that. Therefore, they're confident that actually the plan that's going to come flow from that meeting is going to be good. And that galvanizes them, that makes them feel, do you know what, today is day one, we're now going to push forward. And they sign up, they buy into the various work streams that come out of that. If you don't have workshops, things go on invisibly in the business, there seems to be no real call to action that really mobilizes people emotionally to get things moving. The games can be something that people refer back to, because everyone was there. Do you remember when we said this? That's very powerful. And of course, any big transformational projects or big issues that deal with strategic things, they need this galvanization, they need an emotional connection. And I think workshops can certainly provide that, and invariably do time after time. And in fact, that can be one of the reasons to have it.
Yes.
You speak to the leadership and they say, I want to really get this group going. And you can construct the game to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just a dry affair where spreadsheets pop up and people make presentations. It's a much more engaging process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not just looking at a risk register or something like that. It is much more involved. And it is nice when you get people coming back to you saying, I really want to take part.
Yeah.
From time to time we've done them where we've had observers come into the room
without
a role, purely because they just want to be part and parcel of it. So you're right. It's an incredibly powerful emotional engagement, and I think.
And we're in this together. Right?
Yeah.
Barriers across functions, stop departments, start dropping away. We are in this together, and I know my part of the solution.
Exactly.
It's a very powerful tool.
But it's also, picking up on that piece there, it also allows different departments to understand the problems that other departments have. You can have an operational team saying, well, why can't we do this? And for the legal team to say, because of regulatory compliance of X, Y, Z, you're right. It's probably the best solution we could have come up with. But we can't actually do that. Or maybe it's because finance is saying, because there's not enough funds in this particular cycle for us to be able to do that. We can't do it like this. So now, instead of departments just blaming each other, they understand the function that they do, why they do it, the problems that they've got, and they start to try and work out how they can do this together much better.
Yeah, and I think if you are dealing with broadly uncertainty, which is why the game's been put together in the first place. I think there's a better understanding, not just of the market, what's going on in the marketplace and the issues you're dealing with. If there's a better understanding of what we around the table do, and if there's a galvanizing force that the workshop generates, that can only be good in terms of building confidence about dealing with the uncertainty that the business is facing. It's a great team building activity.
And I think it starts to draw on, the last sort of benefit for me or value for me from these sorts of things is agile, but not agile in terms of consultancy terms we can get vogue. It's agile in terms of the English definition of it. It makes the organisation more agile by being in that room, by all discussing issues together, by sharing some of the problems that might pop up, by identifying some of the solutions. The plan's still going to go wrong. You said it's irresponsible for management not to do this sort of thing. Why is it irresponsible? Because we all know the plan's going to go wrong in some way. It's just inevitable. And so by starting to look at those sorts of things, even when the chosen plan that has been tested in a game or pressure test or whatever starts to still stumble a little in that, you're a lot more agile in adapting to that situation. Because you've got a cohort of people who've all been in that room thinking about what the problems are, the likely solutions, and they can shift to it much quicker. Rather than it having to be we've now hit this problem, now what do we do? Planning cycle, everything's slowing down.
No, it's speed. It allows you to adapt so much more quickly. A lot of what's unwritten has now been written, and now a lot of what's been unsaid has been said. So you don't waste time catching up, slipping through the gears. You can just move into plan B.
Exactly. And I think it's, for me, just sort of closing off, I guess, the research that we've done from the team that I have shown that business performance is broadly dependent on 7 key factors. So there's something you alluded to earlier on, the situational awareness. You call it assumptions. Do you actually understand what's going on? There's the decision making. There's managing stress and coping, basically resilience, personal resilience, coping with fatigue. And then there's communication. There's leadership, which you'd expect, and teamwork, which you'd expect. But at the end of the day, even the very, very best people, without really wanting to, will make mistakes if they are stressed and tired. They don't have a full grasp of the facts. They then make poor decisions. Those poor decisions then impact on their leadership and themselves because they feel the pressure of that poor decision, so they start to communicate differently, which affects the team around them. And essentially, I see a decision game, a pressure test, stress test, call it what you want, a way of replicating those 7 disciplines all at the same time in one place with all of the people. Because you are looking to generate a degree of stress and pressure. It does get tiring because you're having to work very hard. You are having to make decisions and look at decisions you might do. You are challenging assumptions. You're communicating. There's leadership on display. There's teamwork on display. It just pulls it all together and makes the organisation a much more high performing team.
Gaming, the future.
Thanks very much.
I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.